about gun control, and Mr. Abrahamson. And he has a great book. Oh, you don't have it with you right now. Oh, you do. It's by Mark Levin. If you do not have that book, boy, I urge you to go and get it. It is a very, very good book. I hope I didn't take anything from you.
No.
That's all he was going to say is that. No.
Well, honestly, one of the things that Barb had told me starting out for today was that this particular party was to get people informed about what's going on and the nature of the issues. The last Tea Party that we had was kind of a call to arms to understand that we need to do something. And then going forward, what we'd like to do is have people actually read some of the resources and become involved. And if there's one thing, after I get through with the presentation, is that you take to heart the idea of convincing one person you know, just one person you know, about the nature of the Constitution and the responsibilities we have as citizens to ensure our own rights to private property, to self-protection, and so that we can go on and take care of our children in the future. My name is Joseph Abrahamson, and I'm the pastor of a four-point parish named Clearwater Lutheran Parish. And I'm here speaking today not as a pastor, but as a citizen who's concerned about my children and the future that they have. The topic that I was asked to speak on is socialism and gun control. Now, I have to start at the bases because I can't assume that everybody does know the bases of these things. So, first, there is a direct link between personal freedom and the right to own private property. If you cannot own property, you cannot be free. When somebody else has a claim on your property, that means that you owe them something. Today, the main claim on our property, what day is tax day this year? I think it's June 15th, the day after Flag Day. This week we're leading up to Flag Day, and we won't be free of the tax burden until one day after Flag Day. So first understand that our individual freedom, as the writers of the Constitution understood it, depends on our ability to have, to own, to create, to possess, to engage in contracts, and to pass on our property to those that we see fit to hand it off to. The United States is the oldest government in the world. Did you know that? It's the oldest form of republicanism except for the Roman Empire, which fell when Julius Caesar took the crown. A lot of countries in Europe like to say that we're the young kid on the block, but none of them has a history that reaches back more than 200 years with the same form of government. The founders, when they established this government, wanted to ensure that the government itself did not become an impediment to owning personal property and to self-determination. Second, we need to remember that the U.S. Constitution does not give us rights. The U.S. Constitution was written with this preamble: we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. It is the people who have said that the government is limited in its three branches to these types of authority. And furthermore, in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, the founders established that the government could never take away the rights that the people already had. That of the free press, that of expression, that of religion, and that of owning a firearm and carrying it. The government was explicitly forbidden by these amendments from putting any limitations on these freedoms. From the very outset, the founders distrusted not only the government of England from which they had rebelled, but they distrusted every form of government, including the one that they were establishing with the Constitution. They feared the monster it could become if the original meaning of the Constitution were ever neglected. Are you familiar with this debate?
Yes.
The idea of originalism or of loose constructionism. Should we read the Constitution the way that the founders had intended, or should it be adapted to the times? This is what James Madison, the father of the Constitution, wrote to Henry Lee in 1824. He said, I agree entirely in the propriety of restoring to the sense in which the Constitution was accepted and ratified by the nation. In that sense alone is it the legitimate Constitution. And if that not be the guide in expounding it, there can be no security for a consistent and stable, more than for exercise of its powers in the nation. The founders understood, and they taught, that the Constitution should be interpreted the way it was intended at the beginning. Any other interpretation is not in line with the way the Constitution was intended. And if the interpretation goes off into what people want it to mean or think it to mean based on the times, then the Constitution is no longer the guiding law of the land. That is what, in this book that Mark Levin has written, he calls tyranny. But it's not just what he has called tyranny. It is what Abraham Lincoln has called tyranny. It is what George Mason called tyranny. It is what Thomas Jefferson called tyranny. It is what Benjamin Franklin called tyranny. It is what George Washington called tyranny. Tyranny is when we do not have the authority to take care of our own property or own it, to take care of our own people or engage in our own transactions the way that we want. Now, you've heard of socialism. And along with socialism comes other isms like fascism and communism. At the heart of the Constitution is the right of individuals to own private property and to engage in transactions as we see fit. On the other end of the spectrum is the idea that it is only the state that knows how best to direct the country, and that individuals shouldn't have the right to engage in all of these transactions because the state has the plan and knows what's best for its citizens. This is at the heart of fascism, it's at the heart of socialism, it's at the heart of communism, and it's even at the heart of Sharia law. All of these things have in common the idea that we're too dumb to know what's good for ourselves, that we are not the best guides to our own personal freedom. They also have other things in mind, because those who advocate for a statist position, whether socialist or fascist or whatever, have in mind the idea that they can create in this world some sort of a utopia that is better than what the individual can create for herself or himself. Now, I want you to think back over the 20th century. How many fascist countries, how many socialist countries, how many communist countries were able to provide for all of their citizens and give them freedom?
0.
That's right. Not a one. And tied together with this, they promised different ideas about providing for health care, and if you talk to people from Canada or England, they are beruing the fact that they have these national health care programs. Right now in England, there are people arguing that people who do not meet the criteria for a good citizen should be denied national health care. There are people in Oregon right now who are not able to get cancer treatments because of their state health care, because they're judged to be too great a risk, and the treatment might not work anyway. So just give up. So just die. The problem is that when you depend on the state for that kind of a result, the state is going to make arbitrary judgments that do not fit with what's good for yourself individually or for your family as you see fit. They take that power from you by taking part of your property, by taking part of your money, your income, or even for those who would say, it could never happen here. Have you ever heard that through your lives? What if communism were to happen in the United States? Oh, it couldn't happen here. What if they were to come in and take all our guns away? Oh, it couldn't happen here. The truth is that it is happening here. How many of you are aware of what happened in the wake of Hurricane Katrina with the National Guard coming in and seizing the guns of citizens in the counties in which New Orleans is located? Just a few. There recently was a court case settled on that where the government was ordered to pay back the citizens whose guns were taken. But in a couple of cases, these were collections of old antique firearms and that were irreplaceable. Taxation is the seizure of private property for the government and by the government. Now, most citizens under the Constitution will not disagree with taxation for the purposes of the government doing those things that the Constitution limits the government to. We know and understand that there are things that our government must do and those people should be paid. But when it goes beyond what the Constitution has limited the government to, that is where I personally have a problem, and I'm sure many else also have a problem. So what is it that we're concerned about that we need to study, that we need to use to prepare ourselves and our children to be able to take on the problems that are facing us today? The first thing is to study the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And you can get those at heritage.org for free. And to have extra on hand for that person that you're talking to convince that person about what is needed in this country and what is good and what they can see as good. Now back to this idea of it can't happen here. How many of you can imagine a situation where the government takes land away from the landowner and still forces the landowner to pay taxes on it? Raise your hands if you know that. The people that have raised their hands understand what the Wetlands Protection Act is about. There are people today who cannot farm certain land because it was deemed a wetland. Now this took place, I think it was in 1977 that this act was originated, and then in the late 80s it became enforced through the ACS offices. Planes would fly by and they would mark what they thought were wetlands, and it would be a court case to determine that a certain place was actually a rock pile and not a wetland, until the farmer could use it. Now, it's happened in many socialist and communist countries that the government has said, no, you can't move this farm, no, you can't farm here, no, you can't push this tree down, because they had to control the means of production for their citizens, because they were following a plan that they thought was good. But it's already happened here. It's not that it couldn't happen, it's that it is happening. There's a book called Little Pink House. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It deals with the seizure of a small house out east by a government so that they could sell it to a private company who would pay more taxes than the people who lived in it currently. What this represents is a government seizing private property so that it can make more money off of another citizen or group of citizens. They decide who is the one who gets to live there. Private property is no longer private. The Supreme Court upheld this. How about imagining that there would be a country where you would have a situation in which people no longer could go to a doctor when they wanted to? Now we see this. We know what's coming down the pipeline. Do you want to be able to choose which doctor does a knee replacement or a shoulder replacement, or do you want to be put out on a line and waiting list so that the government can